Welcome to DIY Therapy. As always, we'll start with our disclaimer. This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not designed to diagnose or treat. When beginning any exercise program, it should be reviewed and discussed with your medical professional prior to beginning. Information on this podcast is not designed to replace medical treatment. My name is Will. With me, as always, is Andy.
What's up?
Not too much.
Nada?
No.
Zilch?
Nope, just gonna...
Living the dream?
Dreaming to live.
All right. Yeah.
What about you?
I've got my daughter with me this morning with what my wife and I would probably debate is a cold or not, and I lost the battle, and she's home with me today, which I think she probably could have toughed it out at school. But
in her defense, it is cold outside.
What? Sorry, so there's
a
correlation
cold.
between
a
cold and it being cold?
I don't know. Maybe.
Is that what you're saying?
Causation is correlation?
Oh my God.
Or correlation is causation? I don't know.
Yeah. We don't have any background in that, do we?
In statistics?
I don't know. So anyways, yeah, I've got her. So if someone comes yelling in the background, that would be my daughter.
If anyone comes running in yelling about Pokemon, that would be my son.
Yeah. By the way, Will and I are number one dads here. We while we do our podcast, we essentially distract our children with technology. So that's what we do.
That's what good parenting is, isn't it?
I'm going to put quotes around good parenting right there.
Whatever.
Debatable. All right. So what are we talking about today?
Piriformis syndrome.
All right. I know nothing about piriformis syndrome.
The piriformis muscle and the syndrome that it can cause.
Yeah, so piriformis syndrome. This was probably a diagnosis that has been misdiagnosed multiple times. It's kind of it's difficult to distinguish between like what piriformis syndrome is, whether it's coming from the back itself or whether or not it's a something that's a lot of people will consider like general sciatica, whether or not it's general sciatica, piriformis syndrome, or actually stemming from the low back.
Now, sciatica is just the name of the sciatic nerve is just aggravated and just causes pain. That's why it's called sciatica.
Yeah. So the piriformis is actually a muscle, and it sits at the back of our tailbone, the bone called the sacrum, and it kind of goes from our butt and goes across the butt and attaches at the kind of the outer hip bone. And so, is that a bad description? You're laughing.
I'll put up a picture.
Enjoy this. What's that?
Because you're trying to explain something that you have to have knowledge. You have to have prior knowledge of what the posterior hip...
Put up a picture.
I will. I'll put up a picture of it.
Put up a picture. So basically, though, the piriformis acts... its two main functions are really to turn the hip out. So, like, if you're just laying in bed and you, roll the toe out to the side or your whole foot out to the side, that would be the piriformis activating. Or the other aspect is when we are walking and we're basically going into a heel strike position. So we strike down on our heel and we're walking and our weight starts to shift onto that leg. As we drive the leg behind us, the piriformis is actually activated in that capacity. So for a stabilization aspect kind of thing. Yeah. So it helps to kind of propel the body forward as we're during our ambulation, during our walking pattern. So piriformis. A couple other, I think, anatomy pieces that are probably important to understand is that the piriformis, or I guess I should say the sciatic nerve, will actually run beneath or through the piriformis in a small percentage of individuals. So in other words, the nerve coming from the back that usually is associated with like low back pain, neurological pain down into the legs, radicular pain down in the legs, shooting, stabbing, those are all
burning.
Kind of burning.
Numbness,
those are all
tingling,
kinds of symptoms that are associated with that. the piriformis is actually very close to that nerve, and therefore can become affected by that nerve. And so where it becomes a little bit challenging is a lot of the symptoms that are associated with piriformis syndrome are actually associated with typical low back pain or typical low back pain involving the sciatic nerve. So there can be some debate on what is actually the root cause of this. So is it just the piriformis going rogue? Is it something where the piriformis just becomes tight, becomes irritated, and then therefore compresses the nerve, the sciatic nerve, and therefore brings on those symptoms? Or is the irritation actually at the spine, and the sciatic nerve is irritated, and because of the close relationship between the sciatic nerve and the piriformis, is the piriformis then being affected and causing the muscles become more taut and tight? So again, it's kind of, you've got to
chicken
really
before the egg, and the egg, it's
yeah, and you got to dig deep sometimes to kind of see what's going on.
I get what you did there. The piriformis is a deep muscle, and you got to dig deep. I get it.
You know I'm not that clever. So not that clever.
Are you implying I'm reading into things?
Yes, but if it makes me seem more funny, then go for it.
Oh, okay. Then
yeah. Keep going. Help me out, buddy.
Hey.
Build me up.
That's what I'm here for.
You know what I'm here for. It's not the humor aspect of it. So that's really the difficult challenge to kind of differentiate, what is really the root cause. Okay, what is really causing the issue? Is it low back pain, or is it actually the hip pain? So now when you're treating piriformis syndrome, though, or piriformis type symptoms, it's important to note that sometimes you want to really kind of cover both your bases and almost treat your low back and the piriformis. But that's again, it's sometimes the difficulty with kind of the treatment pattern is trying to identify exactly what it is that's being agitated.
Yeah.
So I don't know, comments on that?
Generally, I sometimes will just cover both my bases and do both of them, because neither one interferes with the other when I'm treating a patient like that.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that can sometimes be very that there can be a little interference with is the stretch for the piriformis, which I think we'll put up on some type of social media or link it with this in some capacity. If you're doing that stretch inappropriately, you could be flexing the spine forward a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Which, if you are having some type of problem with the spine, most of the time the spine doesn't like to be bent forward, and so you might be agitating in that way. So you want to do the exercises and the stretches really on your back side. And again, we'll kind of talk about this in a minute, but we'll do the exercises on your backside so that it really locks in your spine, so that your spine doesn't bend forward. So you're just isolating the stretches that you would be performing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll demonstrate that. There's also a way I do a stretch with a tennis ball that you can do it in supine, where you don't have to flex your spine at all.
Mm-hmm. So a couple things signs and symptoms of piriformis. You're going to have typically a dull ache in the buttocks.
Pain in the butt.
Pain in the butt, and it could radiate to the outer thigh all the way down. Theoretically, it could go past the knee, although typically it does not. It kind of stays at that knee. It could go down to the leg or even into the toes. It's usually still provoked by being in a seated position, and that's because the piriformis is actually an elongated position in a seated position. So as the hips kind of bend forward, it stretches out that muscle. So if that muscle is irritated, for one, it'll make it more agitated. And if it's compressing that nerve, the sciatic nerve, then it's as it's getting stretched out, it's going to press down on top of that, which is going to irritate that. So sitting is usually a big sign of piriformis syndrome. And then the other things that really kind of differentiate piriformis syndrome from like back pain would be, if you lie completely on your back and you kind of let your feet basically straighten out your legs all together, let your feet point towards the air and kind of let them relax out. If one of the legs is pulled way out, and that's the side that you're having the issue on, then that could be indicative of a very tight piriformis muscle. Okay, so a lot of times that is something that we'll kind of test in the clinic to see, okay, is it just coming from the back, or are we actually having some relationship to the muscle? If that's real tight, then eventually we'll have to address it. And then the other thing is, typically from a back pain standpoint, standing up is actually something that gives people a lot of relief. Walking is something that gives people a lot of relief. But if you're walking and you're heel striking and you're weight bearing on that affected side, and you're about, and you're having more pain when you're driving off of that leg, then that a lot of times is indicative of it possibly being a piriformis type of syndrome. So that's sometimes how you can kind of differentiate, how much focus you need to put on the muscle itself versus, is it actually the low back?
Yep.
So just a few tips with that. So treatment-wise, you want to talk a little bit about some of the treatments?
Well, stretching, we kind of talked about that a little bit. There's no good way to describe it. Essentially, you'd be laying on your back with your knees bent. You take the leg that's bothering you and put your ankle on your knee, and then you pull that leg, the affected leg, toward the opposite shoulder till you feel a bit of a stretch, no pain, just a stretch, hold it there, and then do that several times.
Yeah. That's actually, this is why I have you describe exercises versus me.
Yeah, but it's so much fun for me to listen to it.
Oh yeah, but it's brutal for our 3 listeners.
Hi, Mom.
She's such a obedient follower. Good for her. All right, so that's
one.
Piriformis stretch. We'll get a picture of that.
Yeah, you can try ice. But I feel like ice is tricky because it's, like I said, deep muscle, so it's underneath your big gluteus maximus, so it's got to go through a lot of stuff. But it won't hurt.
I would stay away from heat.
Yeah, heat's definitely not good.
There's this misconception that, hey, the muscle's tight, so I've got to heat it. But because typically with the piriformis muscle, there's a little bit of tendinitis or muscle irritation with it, and then also the nerve being irritated with it, the heat would probably feel good for, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes after the heat application and during the heat application, but symptoms will probably worsen over a period of time if you continually heat it.
Yeah, so, if something's swollen, that means it's hot, and heating it up just makes it more swollen.
There you go.
Makes it more painful.
So, and then hamstring stretches are a lot of times good, just to kind of stretch out some of the tissue back there. And, again, if there's sciatic nerve involvement, gentle hamstring stretches can kind of calm that down a bit. Nerve glides can help with that too. We won't go into great detail about nerve glides, but a lot of times if you're not too aggressive with a hamstring stretch, that can actually double a little bit as a nerve glide. So you just don't want to be real aggressive with that hamstring stretch.
Yep.
Really, that's how you treat it, though. But the biggest challenge is whether or not it's actually something that's going to come from your low back. So if you go about this and you start to treat this, and hey, you get maybe some marginal improvement. You're working at it for 3 or 4 weeks, and maybe you get 10-15% improvement. It's not really going away. That's when you maybe need to look a little bit deeper and say maybe it is actually coming from the low back. And then go through, some of the low back treatment strategies that we've listed before in the past.
Or you could find in your back pain guide.
And here comes the shameless plug.
Hey.
And I love it.
I'm not shameless. I am shameless.
Guide now. We have a DIY therapy back pain guide that takes you through the entire process of identifying which activities are triggering your pain and which positions are correlated to your pain, so that you can move into better positions and avoid those positions. So there is that option up there. We're going to be putting up some other content on our website that you can get to at DIYtherapy.net or www.theinvertibelt.com. You can go to either one of those websites, and we're going to have some content up there in terms of how to differentiate some of the different positions and patterns for low back pain. That low back pain and piriformis syndrome, really hard to differentiate. If you're not in too much pain and you're willing to work at it to begin with and give it a try, and it doesn't give you much results, then you know that hey, it probably is stemming from the back. Or even if you're working at it and you get 50%, but still 6-7 weeks down the road, you're not getting any better, then there probably is something more underlying that's going at the lumbar spine, and you might have to address that a little bit better.
Yep.
Or a little bit more.
Oh, yeah, the only thing I would add is there's a tennis ball way I use to stretch the piriformis that I can show, too.
Oh, yeah. And people will do trigger point, too. We shouldn't leave that out. I'm not a big fan of trigger point because you're kind of just mashing up that whole tissue to get this moment of relief, but are we irritating it long term? It kind of gives us some temporary relief where sometimes we can introduce different activities and movement patterns that maybe would previously hurt. So you can do some trigger point type release. You just want to be careful with how much.
I would say the trigger point would be more like after everything's kind of calmed down to like that 50%, and then it's somebody there. These are dogs. Dogs warning you.
So we either have dog problem or a child problem.
It's hard
I'm
to know.
hearing any daughter problem yelling in the background, so it looks like it's just dog.
Yeah, but I would say the trigger point is more. If you've gotten 50% better, you could try. That would be something you could look into. You could, once that way you're less likely to irritate it.
Yeah, good point. Like, don't do that. That's probably not your go-to first thing.
No.
Like, you got to get the pain a little bit more manageable first, and then if you kind of plateau or your symptoms stop getting a little bit better, then and you're it's not quite as irritated, then you can get a little bit more aggressive with the piriformis or the trigger point aspect of it. So, yeah, very good point.
Other than that, that's.
I got nothing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I'll put up a picture of because the anatomy of it is weird.
All anatomy is weird.
I know. It really is.
My son is fascinated by the fact that he's held together by bones right now. They must be talking about it in preschool. So I have bones, and they put me together. Okay, good job, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And then if I have to like grab onto him too hard to pull him in one direction or other, Dad, you're gonna break my bones. Okay.
Don't worry, I can fix that.
Someone can. Maybe not me.
Yeah. Other than that, let's put up a couple of pictures for that. Well, maybe I'll put up a video for the stretch and for the. Shut up, Ollie. Now I have a cat problem. And for the tennis ball.
I'm just shaking my head at him.
Yeah, because this cat is so fat. He makes your dogs look tiny. Don't lay on me. You're going to crush me.
All right, let's wrap this up.
All right. This podcast was for educational purposes only. It was debatable if it was educational. It's not designed to diagnose or treat. When beginning any exercise program, it should be reviewed and discussed with your medical professional prior to beginning. Information on this podcast is not designed to replace medical treatment. Remember, treat yourself.